What's up, fellas? I am super excited today. If you saw my last video, you know that the water test went mostly well. A few little kinks I had to work out. But with that done, that means it's time for the Aquascape. So I decided to go with dry Reef Saver rock from Bulk Reef Supply. And I went with this purely for conservational reasons. Bloop. And one thing you should know is this stuff is really heavy. So I had to buy a lot of it, as you can see. And each of these weighs anywhere between 8 and 11 pounds. So yeah, if you're gonna go this route, you're gonna need a lot more than you would if you were to use, say, Picani. And sometimes I kind of wish I would have gone with Picani just because it is so much lighter and I wouldn't have had to pay so much for it. And also it would be a little easier to work. You can chisel it and drill it much easier than this stuff. This stuff's really hard and really dense. But overall, it's got some cool shapes and it's pretty porous, so I'm happy with it. So here's my rock mess. None of this is how it's gonna be in the tank. Don't worry, it's not gonna look like that. Except for this piece here. I really like this piece. One thing I've noticed when people do their aquascaping though, is they put together a great aquascape, they do a dry scape, and then they go to put it in their tank and they can't remember how it went together. Or they have a pretty good idea, but they can't remember if this piece was flipped this way or it's upside down. And so what I've done is I've stolen some of my daughter's Play-Doh and I've used it to kind of color code where some of these pieces connect, so that when I put it back in the tank, I know how each piece faces and each piece connects. So yeah, this is the one I have so far. It's got a nice little overhang, kind of a cave in there. But so far, that's all I've got. The rest of it, I'm gonna kind of have to build inside the tank because it's gonna cover that standpipe. And it's kind of hard to build a tall piece right here without gluing it. So I'm gonna have to do it as I go. So I forgot to mark some of the base rocks with the Play-Doh, and I actually had a hard time figuring out how they went, and it took me a little while of tinkering with it to get them right, but I finally got it. And with the epoxy, you can see that I was using a small rock to kind of press into it where it was showing, so that it kind of give it a little texture and have it blend in with some of the rock. So check it out. We have a family of squirrels that lives in our backyard, and I had just rinsed off my rock and it was sitting out to dry, and this curious little fella comes out to see what's going on. Anyways, back to the scape. I actually had to use some rope to help secure some of the more precariously balanced pieces while the epoxy cured. So here it is, the final aquascape. Looks a lot better in person than on the camera. It doesn't quite pick it up as well. Let's see from this side. So you got the standpipe all hidden behind the rocks, so that's not visible anymore. And yeah, I feel like it's got a pretty good shape to it. So the Play-Doh, this Play-Doh method didn't work as well as I had hoped. The problem was I put this on the rocks and it was like 3 or 4 days before I was able to move it to my tank. And a lot of the pieces had dried and they fell off really easy if you just bumped them or brushed them or whatever. So I think it would work really well if it was fresh, you know, if it had only been like an hour or two. As for the stuff I used to put it together, I use this instant ocean holdfast, which dries like concrete and makes a mess of your hands, but it comes off in a couple days. And then this Cam Reef glue, which also dries really solid. This stuff does not come off your hands as well. It took like a week for it to come off, and I tried peeling some of it off, but it would like pull skin up, so that was a joy. And I also used this accelerator with this glue from Bulk Reef Supply. And that stuff will dry this in like seconds. This stuff becomes really solid, and I'll kind of show you an example in a minute. But I actually started with gloves in the beginning, but it was just too hard to work with gloves, so I ended up doing bare hands. But just be aware this stuff is really messy. I actually had a piece of it burst open while I was squeezing it and got all over my hands. Yeah, it's pretty bad, so be careful with it. So anyways, up here, you see the little overhang I made? That's a bunch of smaller pieces. And I used the glue with the accelerator, and you just stick it on there, spray it, and that stuff dries in like 30 seconds. Just hold it there for a moment. And yeah, it's really solid. I don't think that thing's going anywhere. Any questions or comments, put those down below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I'll see you guys next time. Purely for conversation. Conversational.